Okay, so what is going on with Lotus these days? They do fantastic looking internal combustion engine cars, but then we come to the EVs and it's a split because they have the Emeya, which looks fantastic as well, the hypercar, the EV of Lotus, and then you have the sort of normal EVs of Lotus, the new Emeya, which we're going to have a look at here, and then you have the Elettra as well, where the design just completely falls apart and there is nothing Lotus about these cars. I'm not so sure why we need to make the separation and make EVs look so much weirder than the internal combustion engines when we do have the track record of the company, in this case Lotus, that they actually can make very beautiful looking cars. So what I want to do in this video is have a look at this new Emeya. We're going to have a look at some of the spec and tech here from this article from The Verge, link down in the description, and then I'm going to compare this to, I know it's a coupe and it's a four-door, I think this is a sedan or maybe a hatchback, but I'm going to compare this type of design style language to the Emeya. I'm going to show you where things go wrong with the EV designs of Lotus these days. So first of all, the spec and tech from this The Verge article. You have quick, so first of all, the Lotus Emeya is the latest electric hypercar to join the undersea 3-second club, which is all good. EVs these days, they go like a rocket without any sort of emotion to it. Quick acceleration, ultra fast charging, and a sick spoiler may help this EV compete with the Audis and Porsches of the world. I'm sure it can, you know, the EVs and of Audis and Porsche with this type of package, but the styling, we have to talk about that in a second. It's a four-door sedan, so it's not a hatchback, with nearly 1,000 horsepower and a burning desire to reach 60 miles per hour in under 3 seconds. Lotus claims that the Grand Tourer is one of the fastest GTs in the world. Top speed of 155 miles per hour. Again, every time I hear top speeds of EVs, I wonder for how long you can keep that top speed before you drain the battery completely, because the EVs are notorious for the faster you go, drains the battery exponentially faster. 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. The Emeya is expected to compete with other luxury sports cars such as the e-tron GT and the Taycan. Lotus didn't reveal a lot of the most relevant specs like battery capacity or range, but you can expect it to have around 310 miles of range like the Lotus Elettra SUV. Maybe even more, since this sits lower. It's more of an sedan package. Slippier through the air, I don't know. Lotus says it can accept up to 350 kilowatt of DC fast charging, which will get you around 93 miles of range in about 5 minutes of charging. You have 905 horsepower, 985 newton meters of torque, 296 millimeter wide rear spoiler. You can see that up here. I think this looks good. I think the active aero in this car is phenomenal. It looks really cool when you see it in action. It is more than 100 millimeters wider than the one you have on the Elettra. However, Lotus, here's the problem Lotus find themselves in these days. They only sold 576 cars throughout the entire 2022, which is not great. It's down 62% from the previous year. And that's the reason why I hope they sell a heck of a lot of these electric cars, the Elettra and this new Emeya, so that they can bring in the revenue to start doing what Lotus is supposed to be doing, lightweight, beautiful looking sports cars. So with that said, let's jump into Photoshop here and let me show you my problem with these Lotus EV designs. The rear end looks pretty good, but the front end is just a mess. And also the proportions. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a side view of this Emeya, so I couldn't really compare it, but I really wanted to show you the proportions and just how bulky this looks. I do understand that this is an EV, so you need to have, the battery pack needs to have its space underneath. And I'm starting to realize that before I said that when you have an EV, you have the freedom as a designer to create whatever you want on top of an EV battery, skateboard platform. But the more I start, realizing and seeing new EVs come out, I realize that they have this bulky feel to them just because of that exact reason. Because underneath here, you need to have the battery pack taking up this space, meaning that no matter what type of car you're making, as long as it's an EV, it's going to look a little bit more bulky than its internal combustion equivalent. And that's what's going on here as well. And the front end looks, honestly, having a look at these headlights, I think these are the headlights. I'm not no, the headlights actually sit down here. I see that now. You can see that the main headlights sit here because I thought these were way too small to be, main headlight units. So you have the daytime run lights up here, typical 2023 style, where you have the headlights down here, sort of inside of the bumper, hidden, like we have in the new 7 Series. I think it's the best example of that, and the XM and so on. So these daytime run lights look very static. I don't know what's going on with these very sharp, static looking graphics that we have up top, in addition to this pretty cheap looking LEDs that sits inside. This, honestly, it hurts to say this about Lotus, but this looks like almost like a kit car that was built in a garage by not a professional car designer. And I know that's harsh, but that's just the feeling I get. And then have a look at this line here. So a car design, the challenge, a big challenge when you design a car is that it needs to look great. Every single line needs to flow in a beautiful way, no matter what angle you look at the car. And that's why Horatio Pagani, for example, spends I don't know how many total weeks, months just walking around his clay models when he's designing his car, because he wants to make sure that every single line looks exactly like he wants it from every single angle before he releases a new car. In this case, have a look at this line. What is going on with this hood line from this angle? It looks extremely, not confident in its execution, and it just doesn't look good in my opinion. Then we have these big fins at the bottom creating this huge volume, pulling this front end down to the ground and making it feel front heavy. And you also have this line sitting way too high up. We do have the grill for the battery pack sitting down here, but overall I'm not sure what Lotus is. I hope this is not the direction they're going with their internal combustion engine cars, and I don't think it is, because looking at the Emeya right here, it looks absolutely fantastic. A lot more organic, flowing, fluid designs with a lot less static feeling. You can see just all the curvatures here, the flow into the bumper here going into this side intake. You have this line at the bottom cutting in here, creating a nice line, and we also have some interesting details in the headlights and this outline for the headlight itself, similar to what we have in the Emeya, which is also a beautiful looking car, even though it is in fact also an EV from Lotus. So this is the disconnect that I'm very confused about when it comes to, specifically in this case, EVs and internal combustion engine cars when they come out from Lotus. Both the Elettra looks very similar to this, and that is not a good thing. And then you have this one new, the Emeya, looking very strange, specifically in the front end, with this massive height here and bulkiness. However, the rear end, I think the rear end is completely different when it comes to the execution of this design, because in the front end we have all these static feelings looking, as I said, like a kit car, but in the rear end we have more of a fluid design, and this looks a lot better than the front end. But does it feel do you recognize this car as a Lotus when you look at it? I definitely don't, because we still have a huge volume overall for this type of package, these proportions. And Lotus is all about lightness, and this feels anything but light to me. I do kind of like the light bar that we have here, even if it is, the trend of this decade to have light bars in the rear. We have some active aero down here in this diffuser, which I think is really cool when you see it in action. And the housing for the main key graphics in the rear end has this nice, almost organic feel to it that is completely lacking in the front end. Now, looking at the rear end of the Emeya, it looks very organic again. And have a look at this intake or outlet right here, for example. This is just one example how this beautifully flows into the rest of the side and kind of disappears, fades in this area, creating some very nice fluid motion surfaces in this car. And we also have this very sharp line up top, and this side view is beautiful as well, with this gorgeous intake in the side. This being a mid-engine car, you need to have an intake in the side somehow, and you also have this nice clean design at the lower section with, again, very fluid and smooth motions. The EV's a lot sharper, as you can see, all around here. Now, coming to the interiors, this is also another thing that I don't understand with EVs today. Why do we have to make EVs basically look the same, completely lacking any sort of personality, specifically in their interiors? It feels like all car manufacturers, they got this memo that says this is how we're going to design the interiors of future EVs. Take all the details out, just add a big screen in the middle. And that's exactly what we have here. As you can see, a big screen right here in the middle. And these are two Lotuses from the same model year. And have a look at how they designed the internal combustion engine versions. A lot more detail in this design. We still have a screen in the middle, but we have a nice housing for the gauge cluster. Everything just feels more premium in the internal combustion engine than what it does right here with this big shelf that we have as a dashboard for the passenger. Yes, we have another little display here. I think this whole thing is probably a big display where the passenger can see all the data coming from the gauge cluster. But which one would you prefer to sit in for a long time? Which one do you feel feels more inviting to me? To me, it's every single time when you compare an EV to an internal combustion engine, always going to be the internal combustion engine. I'm not sure if if that's a rule that car manufacturers has these days to make interiors like this, but I am not a fan of it, and I would like to see us go back to less technology. We have enough technology built into cars these days, so let's dial it back, hit the brakes a little bit, and stop putting TikTok into car interiors like Mercedes is doing from factory, and just focus more on the driving, even though we're talking about EVs.